these things, get your book out on the market. We'll all cross our fingers, and hopefully it will go well, and we'll send you checks.
I was wondering if you could clarify about copyright versus the rights that you sign off.
Yes, I will, and actually a little bit further down, we're going to talk about rights in a little more detail. Now the thing about this today, in today's market, the marketing aspect is not a given with any given publisher. So keep that in mind. If you're looking for a traditional publisher, you may or may not get the marketing that you expect from a traditional publisher, because that's one of the first things they scratch off the list if your book isn't making the money they expect it to make. Okay? They have to do the other things. They have to get it in distribution networks. They have to create the book through the interior, cover design, etc. But marketing is something we don't necessarily have to do. And they reserve their marketing dollars for those books they feel have the most potential for sales. So if they are accepting 200 books a year, and they may accept yours, they may feel that only 100 of them really have the sales potential that they're looking for. And that's where they're going to put all their marketing dollars. So marketing is not a guarantee, even with a traditional publisher. I just want to make sure I point that out to you. Okay. So in the past, with traditional publishing, the author really didn't have a lot of say in how their book was handled by the publisher. If the publisher says, okay, we're going to offer you agreement, give us your manuscript, give us your rights, we're going to take care of everything, they would call all the shots. They would create the cover. Do you have any input into the cover? Not really. You might be able to share what you'd like to see, but at the end of the day, the publisher has total control over what the cover of your book will look like. They may pay you in advance. Some of the very larger publishers will pay advances, but remember that an advance is only paid against your future royalties and earnings. So you will have to pay that back. So people sometimes, oh, I'm getting a $50,000 advance. Yes, but the first $50,000 of royalties goes back to the publisher, not to the author. Okay? They really don't need a lot of input from the author because they have their experts on staff to say, this is what we want to do with the book.
What happens if you don't do enough sales to pay back the advance?
You will never get an acceptance letter. Usually, they're really, really good. They're really, really good at making sure that they're at least going to make their money back. Yeah. Now, of course, sometimes they don't, and that they do figure that into their budgetary constraints. But typically, they really tear a book apart to make sure that they are going to make their money back because they don't want to lose money. Absolutely. So before it even gets down to that stage, then you will have already gotten a rejection letter. Yeah. So usually it takes 12 months, sometimes even more, to put together a book through the traditional publishing route. The publisher will determine the final retail price, basically, because they know all the costs associated with creating the book, and they want to make sure that they make their money back, so they're going to determine the final price of the book. The publisher paid for marketing and or promotion. This is in the past, not necessarily today. They still do it today, but not nearly as much as they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. The publisher paid royalties based on the advance and the quarterly sales. This is still done today. They are highly selective, which is why many of us get rejection letters from our submissions that we send to them. And again, the publisher retains all the rights to the material. I'm going to talk about these retaining of rights over and over again, just so everyone understands that when they leave, what they're doing when they're either signing on a traditional publisher or whether they're doing the self-publishing. It's important when you go to make your decision about how you're going to have your book published that you know pros and cons of both ways.
May I ask you a specific question?
Absolutely.
And I apologize to anybody to whom this doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen, and I'm sort of in the nonfiction side,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen on internet publishers list of books, and some which seem sort of specialized and so forth, but some not so specialized have enormous prices.
Mm-hmm.
They're like $65 or $85. So they're just huge.
Right.
And I wonder, sometimes if those don't get published by people who don't think they're going to sell anyway, but feel for some reason, maybe it's an academic publisher or whatever, that they need to publish the book. So they publish it at a price that the few people who are going to buy it will be forced to pay, and they don't expect to sell it to other people. Or do they actually think people are going to pay $85
Well-
or $65? So that's
It's a good question.
a
If the-
concern if you're an author. that
Absolutely.
You get a publisher who accepts, and then you get to that stage where they set the price, and you go,
Right.
oh, no one's going to buy this.
Absolutely. If the publisher is a reputable publisher, they're going to know their market, and they're going to know what the market can bear. So any business that sells a product has to understand what the market can stand. I can't create a fiction book for an author and sell it for $99. The market won't bear it. No one will buy a $99 fiction book because there's 10 million other fiction books that are $9.99 or $15.99. It just won't happen. But in specialty niches where there are books that aren't many books available, the market can bear a higher price. So for example, we do some collecting books, and these books are done in full color, and they sell at a minimum price of $30 a copy. Why are they $30 a copy? Well, number one is because color printing is very expensive. But two, the market bears that price. There's nothing unusual about a $30 ticket for these type of books. Collectors will pay it. So the market can bear that. So in specialty markets, the publisher is probably, I'm going to say probably, marketing or pricing the books at what the market can bear in order to get a return. If they're just throwing prices out there and trying to gouge the public out of a few extra dollars, then they're not very reputable publishers. So traditional publishers today varies a little bit than what it did in the past. Today, traditional publishers will allow authors to call some of the shots. Because the market has changed so much, traditional publishers want to bring on newer authors, and they do lend an ear to what the authors want. They don't allow them to call every shot, but many of them they do. So these publishers may pay small advances, but still typically they don't pay any at all. They don't have the deep pockets that Random House or Simon Schuster might have, so they don't typically pay advances. The publisher usually wants input from the author, as opposed to the large conglomerates that really don't care. They just want the material, they want sales. Today, most books in these smaller publishers can get done in a faster amount of time, 6 to 12 months. Again, the publisher still will determine the final retail price, but the publisher may not pay for marketing and or promotion. That's up to the author. That's quite common these days for smaller publishing houses. The publisher will pay royalties based on the advance in quarterly sales, and they're somewhat selective about the material that they're going to publish. So not as highly selective as the larger ones, but to a lesser degree. Again, the publisher will typically retain all the rights to the material.
Are not some of these contracts now on the advances that if your book doesn't make the advance, you have to pay it back?
Yeah, yep. You have to be very careful about what you sign because that can be written into the agreement. Absolutely, because the publishers, in the end of the day, they are a business, okay, and their goal is to make money. Now, there's a difference between making money and there's a difference between greed. Okay, it's two very different things. But as a business person has to make money or they won't have a business. That's just the bottom line.
Well, to follow up on that, that was the case when I worked in-house. We could go back and get the money, but we never did.
Right.
So do you have a feeling at all how common it is for them to actually use that right to get the money back from you?
I would imagine it depends upon the scruples of the publisher. At Old Line Publishing, we don't have that in our agreement, but we don't give out advances either. So, that's the road that we took. We don't give out advances, so we didn't have to worry about that aspect. But I would imagine that if a publisher did enough of that, where they provided advances and weren't making their money back, if they continued to do that and got more desperate about meeting the bottom line, then they may find that they are going to be going after that aspect of the contract a little more than they might want to.
Or maybe they just start the advances get smaller and smaller as
Yeah,
they, because they're not
and-
gonna want to put out the money to get that money back, you know, to pursue you to get their money back.
Absolutely.
So-
And, you know, in today, the reality of the large publishers today, like Random House and that sort of thing, I'll use Random House a lot because I'm from Carroll County, and that's one of the biggest distribution centers on the East Coast. But their advances that they've given out over the years have gotten fewer, and they've gotten smaller. So even the large companies are not brokering the deals that they did 30, 40 years ago. Because the market has changed so much, there is this variable in the sales that they really can't depend on anymore. Because they can't control the market like they did 40, 50 years ago. And when you can't control the market, then you're kind of left out in the dark. So even the larger publishers are very much more conservative with the number of advances they give and the amount of those advances. So Stephen King is not getting the advances he did 20 years ago. I haven't talked to him personally, but I'm fairly sure.
I heard that, and I don't know if they're still asking for book proposals, but I'd heard that publishers have been asking for book proposals that require that you give them a marketing plan, something that you were committing to do with respect to marketing the book. And that when they gave you an advance, it was based off of your proposal, that you were actually going to commit to do that marketing. And
Right.
if you did not follow through on that commitment, that then they would take back some
Right.
advance.
Right. And that's some intricate agreement work going on there. And I'm not sure I'd sign on board with that type of thing because, you know, once again, if you could even, it leaves you holding the ball. It leaves all the responsibility on you as to whether you're going to make that money back, and no bearing on the publisher's work. And so I'm not sure, if I was an author, I would not want to go that route. And even as a publisher, I would not want to put an author in that position, because guess what happens when the time comes that they didn't sell the number of books